Two desperate Cheyenne sisters stood at Marcus Whitfield's door, rain streaming down their faces, begging for shelter from the men hunting them through the night. His answer made their blood run cold. "Only if you'll be my wives before dawn." But something was wrong with this picture. The rancher's eyes held no desire, only terror. His hands shook as he spoke the words, like he was reciting something he barely understood. Behind him, strange symbols were carved into the wooden beams, and the flickering candles seemed arranged with ritual purpose. The storm was getting worse, and in the distance, they could hear hoofbeats getting closer. The men tracking them were almost here, but now they faced an impossible choice: accept the stranger's bizarre demand or face certain brutality in the darkness. The lightning split the Montana sky like a wound, illuminating Marcus Whitfield's weathered face as he stepped back from his cabin doorway. Two Cheyenne women stood dripping on his porch, their dark hair plastered against their heads, eyes wide with desperation and defiance. Ayana, the older sister, straightened her shoulders, despite the cold rain soaking through her worn buckskin dress. "We need shelter until morning. Nothing more." Marcus's jaw tightened. He glanced past them into the darkness where the storm raged with unusual violence for early autumn. But that wasn't what made his hands shake as he gripped the door frame. "Can't do it," he said, his voice rough as sandpaper. "Not unless—" The words caught in his throat like fish bones. Nayeli, the younger sister, pressed closer to Ayana. She had noticed something her sister missed, the way Marcus kept looking over their shoulders as if expecting unwelcome company. "Unless what?" Ayana demanded, rain streaming down her face. Marcus ran a hand through his gray-streaked hair. His grandfather's deathbed words echoed in his mind, spoken 3 years ago. "When Cheyenne women seek shelter in the storm and dark riders follow their trail, only marriage bonds can protect them under territorial law. It's the old code, boy. The only law that matters when blood runs hot." At the time, he thought it was fever talking. Now he understood it was survival. "Only if you'll be my wives before dawn," he said, the words tasting like poison in his mouth. Ayana's hand moved instinctively to the knife at her belt. "You're insane." "Maybe," Marcus said, stepping aside to let them see into his cabin. "But look at my walls." The sisters followed his gaze. Carved into the wooden beams were symbols, not mystical markings, but practical warnings left by travelers over the years. Messages about safe water, dangerous crossings, hostile territories. And there, near the door, a fresh carving that made Ayana's blood run cold. 3 vertical lines crossed by one horizontal, the mark that meant hunters tracking women. "Death follows." "Who made that?" she whispered. "Tom Bradley 2 days ago. Said there were men asking about 2 Cheyenne sisters in town. Said they weren't the kind who take no for an answer." Marcus's eyes were hard as flint. "Said they'd be here by midnight." As if summoned by his words, the distant sound of horses cut through the storm. Hoofbeats on wet ground, getting closer. Nayeli grabbed her sister's arm. "Ayana, those are the same men who—" "I know." Ayana cut her off, her mind racing. They had escaped those men once, barely, 3 nights ago. But they wouldn't escape twice. Not in this storm, not with nowhere left to run. She looked back at Marcus, whose face held no desire, only grim determination. "Why marriage? Why not just hide us?" "Because," Marcus said, already moving toward his rifle rack, "married Cheyenne women, under a white man's protection, have legal standing under territorial law. Unmarried ones." He didn't finish the sentence. The hoofbeats were getting closer, and Ayana realized that this strange, terrifying night had only just begun. The door exploded inward with a crash that shook the entire cabin. Clyde Morrison filled the doorframe like a mountain, water streaming from his black coat his pale eyes scanning the room until they found the sisters. "There you are, beauties," he growled, stepping inside without invitation. 3 more men crowded behind him, all armed, all wearing the same predatory smile. "Been chasing you for days through this godforsaken country." Marcus stepped between Morrison and the women, his rifle trained on the intruder's chest. "You're trespassing on my land, Morrison. Get out." Morrison laughed, a sound like gravel in a bucket. "Your land? This whole territory is changing hands, Whitfield. New railroad operations need workers, all kinds of workers." His gaze lingered on Nayeli, who pressed closer to her sister. "We're not workers," Ayanna said, her voice steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. "We're people." "Not according to the new territorial guidelines," one of Morrison's men said. "Native women caught off reservation land are considered vagrants. We're just doing our civic duty." Marcus's finger tightened on the trigger. "That's not how the law works, and you know it." "Depends on who's interpreting the law," Morrison said. He took another step forward, ignoring the rifle pointed at him. "See, Whitfield, you can shoot one of us, maybe 2, but not all 4. And when you're dead, we take the girls anyway." Ayanna felt time slowing to a crawl. In her peripheral vision, she could see Nayeli trembling, could hear Marcus's labored breathing, could smell the rain and mud and violence that filled the small cabin. Everything her grandmother had taught her about survival came flooding back. When cornered by wolves, becomes something they don't expect. "I accept," she said suddenly. Everyone froze. Morrison blinked in confusion. Marcus's rifle wavered slightly. Nayeli stared at her sister in shock. "Accept what?" Morrison demanded. Ayanna stepped forward, chin raised. "His proposal. We accept marriage to Marcus Whitfield under tribal law and territorial law, witnessed by all present." She grabbed Nayeli's hand. "Both of us, right now." "The hell you do," Morrison snarled. "Those girls are coming with us." "No," Marcus said, understanding flooding his face. "They're not. Because under Territorial Statute 247, married Native women under white protection cannot be removed from their husband's land without a federal marshal's warrant, and the nearest federal marshal is 3 days' ride from here." Morrison's face turned purple with rage. "You can't marry them without a preacher." "Actually," Yana said, her voice gaining strength, "under Cheyenne law, witnessed vows spoken before dawn create binding marriage. Your presence here makes you legal witnesses whether you want to be or not." The silence stretched like a bowstring. Rain drummed on the roof. Lightning illuminated the faces of dangerous men, realizing their prey had just become legally untouchable. "This is impossible," one of Morrison's men muttered. But Morrison was studying Marcus's face, looking for weakness, for doubt. What he found there made him take an involuntary step backward. "You'd really do it?" he asked. "Marry 2 Cheyenne girls to spite me?" Marcus never took his eyes off Morrison. "I'd marry them to save them. Whether that spites you is just good fortune." Morrison's hand dropped to his gun. The cabin held its breath. And that's when they heard something that changed everything. Another horse approaching through the storm. But this rider wasn't one of Morrison's men. This one was riding hard, like someone bringing news that couldn't wait until morning. Through the storm, a voice boomed before the rider even dismounted. "Morrison! I know you're in there. Come out with your hands visible." Sheriff Tom Bradley stepped through the broken doorway, like justice made flesh, his badge gleaming in the candlelight, his own weapon drawn. He took in the scene. The destroyed door, 4 armed men facing off against 1 rancher and 2 young women, the smell of violence thick in the air. "Well, well," Bradley said. "Clyde Morrison should have known. His eyes found the sisters. "These the Cheyenne women you've been tracking?" "They're fugitives," Morrison said desperately. "Off reservation land without permits." "Actually," Bradley said, holstering his gun, "they're not." He reached into his coat and pulled out an official document. "Just rode in from territorial headquarters." "These women aren't fugitives, Morrison. They're witnesses in a federal case against corruption in the Bureau of Indian Affairs." The silence that followed was deafening. "What?" Ayanna whispered. Bradley's expression was grim. "Your father sent word to federal authorities before he died. About Indian agents selling Native women to work camps. About officials taking bribes to look the other way." He looked directly at Morrison. "About men like you profiting from human misery." Morrison's gun wavered. That's impossible." "Your father was a brave man," Bradley told the sisters, "and his evidence is going to hang a lot of powerful people." He smiled coldly at Morrison. "Starting with you." Morrison's face twisted with desperate rage. In one fluid motion, he grabbed Nayeli around the throat and pressed his gun to her head. "Nobody moves, or the girl dies." "Morrison, don't!" Bradley shouted, but he didn't dare raise his weapon with Nayeli in the line of fire. "You want to talk about law?" Morrison snarled, backing toward the rear door. "Here's my law. I'm walking out of here with at least one of these girls, or she dies right here, right now." Marcus's rifle cracked like thunder. Morrison crumpled to the floor. Bradley knelt beside Morrison, checking for a pulse. "Dead," he said simply. He looked up at the sisters. "It's over. The whole network is finished." Ayanna felt something loosening in her chest, a tension she'd carried so long she'd forgotten it was there. "It's really over." "The trafficking ring is broken," Bradley confirmed. "These men will hang for what they've done." As the other men were led away in chains, Ayanna found herself looking at Marcus. Really looking at him for the first time since this nightmare began. He'd risked his life for strangers, honored his grandfather's memory, and shown more courage than any man she'd known. "The marriage," she said quietly. "It was for protection only." Marcus nodded. "Of course. You're free to go wherever you want now." But Ayanna surprised herself by stepping closer to him. What if we didn't want to go anywhere?" Marcus's weathered face softened. "Then I'd be honored to have you stay. Both of you. As my family, in whatever way feels right to you." Nayeli looked between her sister and Marcus, then smiled. The first genuine smile anyone had seen from her all night. "I think," she said softly, "we'd like that very much." Outside, the storm was finally breaking. Through the clouds, the first pale light of dawn crept across the horizon. The long night was ending, but their new life together was just beginning. Sometimes the most shocking demands hide the deepest acts of love. And sometimes when you think you're saving someone else, you discover they've saved you right back.